Thanks to Nathaniel earlier, PMG provides the future-proof BPM platform. Seriously, provide low-code BPM platform, making it easy for developers and non-developers to collaborate and solve problems quickly. And really want to focus on integration today and tie it to innovation. Innovation, big component of driving transformation, and integration is a key element of that. So for example, we want to take advantage of the next wave of technologies, AI, ML, IoT, blockchain, RPA. And to do that, there's a few problems that we're looking at solving. First, we're too slow to innovate. Startups are moving fast. There are so many of them. The markets are changing fast, colliding, overlapping. All these new integration points exist as well because of that. Also, users and their preferred ways of working. Part of the integration and innovation is bridging together those people to the technology. So meet your users and their preferred interfaces, such as Slack, or for 4 more years, your cell phone. And then after that, something else based on the megatrend. And development. Requiring developers for integration can be a problem, slow you down. They're busy, they're high demand, you have to wait to get their time. And as a business user solving the process, you may need integration as part of that. And then once the developers are free and you meet with them to go over the requirements and you iterate, it takes time, you're still not moving fast enough. So these problems is an issue around the next wave of innovation that we want to take advantage of. So for example, we start with RPA. Leverage the BPM platform to call RPA to do what it's good at around string scraping, data gathering, manipulating data. Have RPA bots call back to BPM platform and take advantage of what you already have in place around your integration points, your governance, tie those together. Another area that IBM, Microsoft, Amazon, a few others have lots of time and money invested in is around AI. And we can take advantage of that quickly today, and it's affordable. And related to the AI story is, of course, machine learning. Maybe you start off quickly using Amazon ML, and now, whoops, they're a competitor tomorrow. So switch over to Azure ML quickly. Make that possible in your workflow. And of course, things are everywhere. They're going to be everywhere, whether that's sensors or robots. You need a platform to listen to those events and messages and take advantage of those systems. And finally, blockchain. This is an area that many of us are watching and figuring out what to do here, trying to find customers that help with the POC, get to those real-world use cases in the enterprise. But just be ready to take advantage of this opportunity when it presents itself. And PMG can help here. We provide drag-and-drop workflow. Developers, extendable, is powerful. For non-developers, you can take a process and make it real quickly. And after you have that workflow, make it easy to set up an API. So with no code, a few clicks, set up your inputs, outputs, your security. Now you have your workflow published as an API for other systems. Maybe take that text message from Twilio or listen to some IoT event. And now, as those workflows are published as APIs, go to the user interface side. Alexa could be your chatbot. Take in data from WordPress. Doesn't matter what the interface is at this point. And PMG's workflow engine is dynamic and can run pretty much anywhere. It can run high control, high logging, dedicated instance. It can run on web servers in memory for fast results, so asynchronous and synchronous, and also across networks in secure and remote protected areas. And the workflows are reusable, and they can kick off in different ways. So for example, the same workflow kicked off from a form can be kicked off from a phone call, from Alexa, chatbot, and so forth. And we're really looking at bringing developers and non-developers together, both business and IT, to integrate, take advantage of the innovation opportunities, and move forward. And as part of the demo, we'll take an existing new vendor onboarding process. We'll add in a machine learning call to help with the approval. And then we'll look at integrating to RPA bots, take a message back from RPA, and also do some approvals by phone calls, text message, and Slack. PMG platform has the whole portal, forms, work, reporting, all of that experience. We're going to look at the front end for about 30 seconds today. I'm just going to use it to go find a simple new vendor form that we'll use to help kick off our workflow. We'll just set this up real quick. And we'll come back and submit after we've made updates to our workflow. Pretty standard layout, diagram in the middle, palette of actions on the left, from human activities to pre-built connectors to many of the enterprise and cloud systems. So all these actions are pre-built on the left that you can drag and drop over to the palette. And properties will show up on the right panel. And we're going to start with going up to the first decision step, that is going to evaluate what type of vendor is this. And you can see if it's an individual, there's going to be a risk assessment approval. So we went ahead and set up some data points in Azure ML, and we're going to call Azure ML and ask for a probability that this is going to get approved at the risk assessment level. So we're trying to bypass this approval where it makes sense. So first thing we'll do is pull in our approval, our Azure ML approval step. Now, I still have on maybe my business user hat here, and this looks pretty simple to configure. I'm going to do some mapping of preset global variables I have just to speed up the data point. But we're mapping data that we'll send to this action. And we're going to expect back a probability result that we'll save to this variable. And I'll show under the covers of this function in just a moment. We're going to drag over this individual output to go through the Azure ML approval. And once we get a result back, we want to evaluate the data. We're going to use a decision step. And keep it very simple. We're going to add an output of bypass approval. And we're just going to say when all of these are true, Azure ML result variable is greater than or equal to 75. So we'll use 75% as our probability. And if that's not the case, we'll just set up a default output that says approval. So now, decision step, if we want to go to approval, pick the approval output. And if we want to bypass the approval, we'll go out bypass approval. So this is the new area that we're adding here to incorporate machine learning. Now, if I put on a slightly more technical hat, we'll jump over to a workflow I just set up earlier around Azure ML. And in this case, we have a predictive experiment action, and the two main inputs that I care about here are the scenario, and for us the scenario is what's the URL, what's the authorization token, anything else that you want to save. And in this case, an admin maybe sets that up. And now as an end user, I just need to know it's called BPM next, and it has the credentials that I need. And in this case, we have a JSON document in here with the data that we're passing to Azure ML. Now this is JSON. It's not hard, but still for business users, we don't want them to have to necessarily go into JSON and XML. So as my more technical hat on, I've set up this Azure ML action, and this will do the real-time call to Azure when we run it. And I have just a set of 4 more actions that is taking the data back, parsing it for the probability in that data, and then returning it to my calling workflow. And as we jump back, again, this function here points to the workflow I just showed a moment ago. So after we get past the risk assessment, there's another approval. This is called main approval. And this is the one that we want to open up and take a look at adding some other ways for users to interact with the approval. So if I jump ahead to the main approval action, once it's assigned, it's going to send an email. So a user can come into the platform, approve or reject, or from their email client or their phone, they can decide as well. Let's say the user is out in a warehouse, has no internet access. This is where we consider, maybe we can do a phone call and/or a text message to handle this user. So we'll just drag more assignment outputs to Twilio here. And of course, we have to use the ever-famous Slack post to also ask for approval from those users that maybe don't live in their email anymore, but now they live in Slack. So 3 different routes. We'll go ahead and go into the Twilio. Again, the scenario is the URL, authorization information. And I need a phone number this is sent from, and I have a global variable that's set up. So I don't have to know this, I just have to know what variable to pick. I'm going to use my cell phone number, but I saved it in a variable as well in case I forgot it while I'm setting it up here. And then a text message that say, please reply 1 to approve. I also can include a URL in case the user actually has internet access, which usually most of the time they do on their phone. Or click here to approve. And I have a URL variable set up to facilitate that. We can set up the phone call. This is where you just think about tying into chatbots and other interfaces. You could go on here. With Slack, just to show more configuration. Again, all scenario. What channel do we want to send this to? As what user? And the message. And so now, just like a few others have shown today, we can use Slack as our mechanism talking to the users. And that's ready to go. So we essentially just added a few other ways to get to users in the interface here. Go ahead and deploy. I didn't configure the phone call, so we won't call the phone call option. So now that's valid. We'll go back to the main workflow. OK, so we just configured the sub workflow main approval. And then after it gets approved, it's some basic steps. It's just going to create a vendor in our system. But what about the RPA guys? So a few ways we can look at doing this. I'm going to pull in just a REST action. Trying not to pick any favorite vendors here, but I went online and quickly found UiPath API on starting a job. So I'll just grab a realistic but non-functioning UiPath URL. Paste it in the URL parameter. I'm going to do a post. And according to their API, this is the format that we need to start a job with the UiPath. And I'll pass in the data. And if I pull up the editor, you can see a little bit better. You can see where potentially, if something's dynamic, I can look for dynamic data that's part of this workflow. Not to pick on just one vendor or to use one vendor, let's say Automation Anywhere. I know they have, I think, a web service that's available. So you can pull in an invoke web service action, set up the SOAP connection, and call Automation Anywhere as well. And we can do this in serial. We can do all these in parallel. So we don't have to stop or slow down the main process from finishing. It's up to us. After we call the RPA, we have different ways to wait or listen for messages. In this case, after the REST call of the UiPath, we can sit here in the workflow and wait for a message back. Basically, we would just need to make sure the key is unique, and we get that back from the RPA system so we know to move forward. Or perhaps, let's say, we don't want to use the form to start off this workflow, and we want RPA bot to kick off this workflow from an API call. So we go to what we call workflow functions. And I'll click on Add. So it took the workflow I have open right now. And I can name this whatever I want. And the main thing we need to look at is, let's set up the input values that we need for this to work. And is there an output? I'm not going to have one for this case. We can set up security, API key. We can make this anonymous if you want to. And if I just click Save, come back over, click on this guy. Now we're looking at the documentation around the workflow API endpoint. You can tell it's kind of inspired by some other formats. I can test the API call here. I can export to Postman, give it back to the group running the RPA side. So here they have the URL and the data that they need, or they can import it if they have a function.